Hello, everyone, and welcome again. Together with Prasanjit and Sambit, we are here once again to talk to you about all things SAP on Azure. We are now at episode 9, and today's session is all about Azure Backups. It's going to be a very nice, interesting discussion talking to you about Azure Backups. We'll start with the overview, and Sambit will kick off with that overview.
Thanks, Nishan. Hello, everyone. Generally, when we talk about enterprise application, doing backup is more than just taking a copy of the data and storing it someplace safe. So there's a lot of things involved in it. There are obviously different backup solutions out there in the market. But when we talk about taking backups in Azure, Azure Backup is a very comprehensive and native solution that we provide to basically handle everything that surrounds backup. So when we talk about backup management, we talk about backup policies. How often would you do your backup? What is the retention period? Whether you want a full backup or incremental backups. Beyond that, there is a management piece out of it, like also in terms of how do you secure your data, then who has access to the data backups. Then also we talk about performance, how fast we can restore and back up our data, and whether it meets all our availability SLA requirements or not. At Azure Backup, we support a diverse workload that are coming into the cloud. Not only for this workload, we provide management capability either at a storage level or a security level, like encrypting the data for security. So we provide encryption at rest, and also we provide backup data to be replicated to multiple zones and regions for greater durability. But having said all of this, there is concern from customer around cost as well. So we provide options like we can have like for shorter restore, faster restore, you can have your data in standard storage. And for data that will be kept for months and years can be stored in a cold storage or as an archive tier for longer period of time. Uh, Again, like how do you manage your vault and set up your policy? It all depends. Like there is a backup center, which is our one-stop solution to everything surrounding backup. And that's where like Azure Native Backup is a comprehensive solution designed to meet all our backup needs.
Great. I mean, we understand that security is extremely important to you, especially considering that your data is sitting in Azure and Microsoft is taking responsibility of protecting that data. You can be rest assured that whether your data is in transit or even at rest, there is a security around this. So as your data comes into Azure, we use private endpoints and specific network connectivity options like VPN or ExpressRoute. But the private endpoints is essentially providing you that extra level of security of data that's actually in transit. So even when your backups are already sitting in a storage account managed by a recovery services vault, we have security enabled on top of that as well through a fault domain or separate security type of features to make sure that your data is protected additionally. This could sit in even a block blobs type of storage account, and so to speak. We also have basically the option of you configuring your recovery services vault as zone ZRS. We're replicating across zones or even across regions in the form of GRS. So whilst your backups are sitting in the storage account, we can also use customer managed keys with further security enablement around 256-bit AES encryption. So you can be assured that there's more security around that. And even more better, that you can actually now control who actually manages backups from an Azure perspective. So there's specific roles that you can assign to specific people that's responsible. And this is all managed in Azure through RBAC. So for example, you can have a backup operator type of role, a contributor type of role with certain permissions to do certain things. And then also, which is quite cool, is let's assume that at some point in time, you mistakenly delete a backup or delete the data from the storage account. We have this option called soft delete so that even after 14 days, even after you delete the backup or the backup data, it will remain in the account for 14 days if you enable the soft delete option. And even further, or even better, we also have multi-user authentication, which adds another layer of authorization, especially when it comes to critical operations, especially useful when it comes to things like ransomware and so on. So what do we support from an Azure backup perspective in terms of the different types of databases? So apart from just Microsoft types of solutions like MySQL and Microsoft SQL, we also support fully SAP HANA as well as Oracle. And when it comes to these types of additional databases, we have different types of ways in which we support. We do actually streaming backups, and we also use snapshot backups. So check it out because this could be important for you. But all of these backups also will be dependent on your backup strategy. You know, what is your recovery point objective, and what is your recovery time objective? We work according to that in terms of how you would actually have your backups protected in Azure. So there's different types of things here, but my colleague Prasanjit now will actually take you deep into the SAP side of things when it comes to backups.
Well, perfect. So we are discussing mainly that what are the different database are going to work with SAP application, and in context to that, what are the different databases are being supported to take the backup through Azure Backup. So at this moment, we have the integration for SAP HANA and SQL Server as a transactional backup with our Azure Backup. Let's take a quick look that what is being supported, what are the different restrictions that you can take your you can define your strategy based on that when you are finding that Azure Backup would be the valuable backup solution for you or not. When it comes to HANA, and this is most important for many of our customers because now the roadmap is also going to S/4HANA, so HANA becoming the uniform database platform across the SAP landscape. So from HANA perspective, we support both SDC and MDC type of deployment. SDC was a little bit earlier methodology, but MDC is the latest default methodology for HANA deployment. And as far as the revision goes, we normally support the latest revision. Don't get a little bit misleaded by the less than equal to 55. We do support the latest available HANA version to back that up with our Azure Backup. Similarly, for SQL Server, we have support for SQL Server 2008 and above. And when it comes to the OS platform, then it's 2008 R2 and above. For SAP HANA, similarly for the OS context, it offers both, it offers support for both SUSE and Red Hat. And we also do some parity check with what being supported for SAP application from OS standpoint, we do support these OSs. Now, when it comes to the scenario of a HANA backup, we do have support for different scenarios. So one scenario is standalone Azure VM backup. So where you have only one single database, mostly for the non-prod systems, then you can take that backup with our Azure Backup for your HANA database. But you might be having the production system with replication turned on. So that HSR, HANA System Replication, that also now being rolled out and being featured as a preview feature that is being offered through Azure Backup. So you can utilize to take the backup of your production system, which is highly available with our Azure Backup as well. On the other hand, from the SQL Server standpoint, the SQL Server always on availability group is being supported by Azure Backup. When it comes to the performance, this is also a critical indicator because we have to understand how this backup, it's not just the backup, the restore, gonna support your RPO and RTO criteria, because that's the most important thing that you'd like to achieve in case something happens and you have to work with the backed up data. So when it comes to the performance, Azure Backup use a separate networking uh, um, power platform, which actually produces around 420 megabits per second throughput, depending on, of course, one certain hardware, because yeah, we need to also understand that the backend infrastructure should not be act as a restriction for the networking throughput. On the other hand, for the SQL Server, it's around 200 megabyte per second. So this is all about stream-based backup. We also do offer for snapshot backup with HANA and SQL Server. These features are also in the preview mode, but it's worth to mention that if your database is, let's say, more than 8 terabyte or between 6 to 8 terabyte, then maybe the streaming backup is not going to be very helpful or wise decision, because you might have a very low RPO RTO that you need to achieve. So in those circumstances, maybe the HANA snapshot backup would be the most appropriate one. When it comes to what are different configuration it supports the TDE encrypted databases. You can also integrate Azure Key Vault to save your credential over there, and it also have the built-in checksum. So earlier, my colleague Sambit was telling that it actually we have a tool called Backup Center, which is positioning as a center of orchestrating your all backup jobs and all the backup report. So you can get a consolidated report from the Backup Center, which will give you a full insight about how many backups were taken, the backups were useful or not, if there is any failure. And it also does all these checksums so that it makes sure that backups are usable during the time of your need. So yeah, so far we have discussed about the backup scenarios, the backup supports. Why don't we see something live in action? And here we are trying to showcase the HANA, but definitely this is applicable for the other databases and other scenarios as well. So let's jump into that what is actually needed to back up your HANA system. I'm going to share my screen with the lab setup. So if we go through the document, we have a very good documentation that how to take the backup. So first, there are some prerequisites that you have to fulfill. So the first prerequisite is from the networking side, because you need to enable some of the egress or the outbound connectivity towards other Azure services. For example, Azure Active Directory, the backup Azure Storage, because it is utilizing the blob. And if you have some public address, then the fully qualified domain name. So we have a full step-by-step guidance that how you can configure the network security group and making sure where is your database belonging to that subnet is allowing the traffic to go out. So that's for the networking part. And then another scenario, if you are not exposing or not allowing the connection via the internet route, then you definitely, from the security standpoint, you can connect the recovery services vault with a private endpoint. I'm not going detail into these topics. Then let's scroll through that what else we need from backup implementation point of view. So these are all related to the network. Then you obviously need a recovery services vault. And this recovery services vault, you can either create from the portal or through other automated tools. And once the backup vault is created, the next step is obviously that you have to yeah, do some configuration about the recovery services vault. Let's jump in and see that what I am having in my lab subscription. So I'm going to open a new tab over here just to show you that what are the recovery services vault are being created. So this is the recovery services vault I have created for this. If you look at the properties, it is running in West Europe. And then there are a couple of settings that you can definitely change it. So one thing is the backup configuration. Here you can put geo redundant or zone redundant or locally redundant. As Nish was mentioning, you can have the redundancy in the zone level or even the region level, depending on how you would like to protect. Then there is another nice feature or very important feature called cross region restore. So if you put it in enable, then definitely the backup data gonna be available in the paired region. So in case you'd like to do some test, earlier what it was happening, you wouldn't have access to those data until and unless the primary region has been declared as failed one. But now you'd be having the access to that data to restore the database in the secondary region. So this feature is very nice. And here another thing to mention, we are not charging the egress data transfer while you are enabling the cross-region restore. Then this is part of how you can safeguard from a very big catastrophe, just enabling the CRR and being the globally replicated. Then you have the security part, encryption. I think Nishan has mentioned that you can utilize even your custom key. So that is also applicable over here. Then immutability. I mean, this is a new feature. So if you put enable vault immutable, then it is very difficult to overwrite the data on. Multi-user authorization, I'm not going to detail each and every part, but you have a lot of option to actually safeguard your backup vault from bad actors or even different security issues that usually you might need to you will face in future. And then the monitoring setup, you can also do some monitoring on top of the backup. Now let's go back that how you can protect in HANA system to our topic. So here, if you click on the backup, this is the getting started window. And in this wizard, you need to select whether the system is running on Azure or in a different platform. For the time being, I mean, we are working in this lab, or my system is running on Azure platform. So let's choose Azure. And then you see a lot of categories that what type of application or infrastructure you're going to back up with Azure Backup. Here we will choose Azure SAP HANA for Azure VM. The next step is to discover the database. So just click on the discovery. It's very easy. Just click on it. But here you have to put an attention that the discovery only works if the script, so there is a script, automated script, which we have developed just to make sure that all the prerequisites that are needed in order to connect our backup service to your backend system. So you need to run this. So this will make all the prerequisite fulfilled inside the system, not the networking part. So what it does, it creates the user for the backup to be taken. It also creates, for example, the HDB user key and all those different things. It also checks some of the connectivity towards our Azure storage or Active Directory. And there are many different command input that you will be able to see from our guide. So let's go and check that what is the script. So this is a long script. So the first step, what you will do, copy the script in your local HANA server. So I have the HANA server running over here. And if I show you where the file is, so I have copied exactly the same script over here. Now I need to run that script. So what I will do, I'll put bash config and that's it. So it will check and it will verify whether the user exists or not. It will check the SID and you will see a successful result once everything is created. You can see that backup user has been created. You can also validate this through your HANA Studio. Here you can see in the security blade, yeah, in the user. And if you just refresh it, you will see the user has been created, and this user would be having the privileged backup admin, catalog read, database admin, ini file admin. In case you wanted to provide your own user like this, so you have to create the user beforehand, and then you have to provide the key over there. So you can see there are options. So for example, how do you know what are the options that you can work? So just type help, and then it will give you all the option for parameterized the script before you run it. So you can customize a lot of stuff which automatically happens in a default manner. So you can control it by supplying your own backup user, by supplying your own system key, instance number. If you would like to skip the network checks, you can also skip that. So this is the way you can actually do that work. So let's jump back again. So I'm
Just a
done.
quick question, Prasanjit,
Yep.
sorry to disturb.
Sure.
How long does that script normally take to run? Because I saw it was quite quick there. Does it take
Yeah,
a
so
few
it will
seconds
take
or?
around
Yeah,
30 seconds to 1 minute, not more than
okay.
that. It's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's
So
quick.
now I
Yeah.
have ran that script. So the next step is obviously I need to detect whether there is a HANA instance running within this server or not, because that was the whole purpose for me to running the script. It makes sure that it build the bridge in between. So I will click on the button, and then you see immediately a deployment has happened. And this deployment, what it does, it actually deploys the agent in the backend VM so that it can connect via the Azure Backup, and then it can also identify what are the different instances are running. So this will take normally 5 to 10 minutes, depending on your network connectivity, depending on what are the different agent would be deployed. So let's just wait for a couple of minutes while we can also show you some of the networking stuff here, because as I said that from the networking standpoint, right now I haven't have any private endpoint. So obviously it is taking the public network and anybody can access the resource. If you'd like to protect that no one can access the resource, then you just click on deny, but then it would be inaccessible from your backend VM. So for that matter, you have to make sure you have a private endpoint and you have allowed, or you have had the route configured towards your backend VM so that it can contact the backend VM from your backup vault. Yes, and then if you go on identity, you can also assign the system assigned identity if you don't allow anonymous user or your internal user to access the backup vault. And finally, the backup center, you won't be able to see at this moment because I don't have any backup, but you just search it with backup center. And once you have a successful backup, then you will see the report over here. It would be on 24 hours, or you can also have report on a weekly basis. You can also see the backup jobs, which would be running via the backup recovery services vault. Another feature or another thing that you have to work with the backup policy, because all the backups are driven by the backup policy. Now, by default, I have two policy. Now, let's say, yeah, now we see the resource is deployed now. So yeah, without doing much over here, let's go through the wizard that what we have to do as the next step. So go back to the recovery services vault. And the same way, we'll go to the backup. We have already configured, we have already discovered. So here, just don't click on start discovery again because we have discovered. Now we will just see the view details. And here I see that my system has been detected. So 1 DB instance and 2 DB is found. So the next step would be to rediscover instance or unregister or register, but we don't need to do anything. So if you go inside, let's go over here. Now you will do the configuration. So we will do the backend database backup here. You can also take a snapshot, but let's discuss later. So for the backing part, you just click on the config backup, and then you need to supply a policy. So by default, there is a policy that will be automatically created. But let's say you don't like that policy, it will not work according to your organization standard. So you can just edit the policy or even create a new policy. So depends on what you will feel comfortable. So I can provide like it's a HANA backup policy. And then I can provide the frequency. I can specify the retention period. So click on edit, and then you will get all the option to control that how the backup will be taken, how the data would be stored, and how long it will be kept over there. For example, I don't wanted to keep the backup data for longer time, and then I just wanted to, just switched off everything just to make sure that I don't need to retain my backup. And here, the retention time you can also control. So I can put 7 days instead of 180 days, and then I click OK. So this policy would be kicked immediately. And then it is also saying the log backups. So here you can also control that how frequently the log backup would be taken. So here the backup schedule is 2 hours, but you can definitely minimize this for 15 minutes the latest, and retain for, let's say I have taken the data backup retention 7 days. So here I also create the same, provide the same value. I click OK. And then there are two other backup possibilities, differential backup and incremental backup. If you wish to have differential backup, you can just turn on. Same thing for the incremental backup. Let's not do all this thing together. And then you just need to enable the backup. So now the policy has been configured. And the last part is adding the database instances. So which are the database would be part of this? So I select this, and then if you just expand, you will see the master database, the system database, and the instance database. So I'm taking the backup of both of them. So I just click OK. And once I have selected, then I just click on enable backup. And this will take a couple of seconds, a minute, depending on the database size. And then I will get to see that my database is ready to take a backup through Azure Backup. Isn't it easy?
Yeah, that is really cool. And then you could also see it in Backup Center, right? Once it's enabled,
Exactly.
because you've configured it now. Yeah, that's really
Exactly.
cool.
So once you configured, you will see everything in the Backup Center. Yep.
Really cool. Tell me something, I'm just curious. So that script that you ran earlier, what if we want to do like 50 VMs to run the script? Do we have to do that manually? I mean, I've ran a few before. I wasn't sure. How do we do like multiple VMs to run the scripts?
That's a really good question. Yes,
Yeah.
so far, I mean, there is no way to scale it in a multi-deployment mode, and it's specific to the HANA host. So unfortunately, you have to run it individually in every host.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But that's a great question. We might need to check with our product team if there is a way that we can do this deployment in a more scalable fashion.
Yeah, I know I had some issues with this SAP HANA backup user in the past, where I had like there was already a user existing and I needed to remove that user because when you run the script, it creates the user for you. And for some reason it worked that way. So just maybe something to share with the audience. I didn't have an issue around that before, but it was easily resolved.
Yeah, so as we already walked through, I mean, when you run the script without giving any parameter, then by default that create Azure WLB backup HANA user. But let's say if a customer would like to provide his own user, then it can be parameterized. So if you go back and see that what are the different parameters available, then you see there is a parameter available for SK, the system key. So you have to provide the system key, and then you have to provide the BK, the backup key. So you can create the backup key. For example, here what I'm using. So if you just execute the HTTP user stored list, I'm using system K as a system. You might have, or the customer might have a different system key. So that would be one thing. And another problem which I understood that if by mistake this user got deleted, right? What will happen? Again, if you run the script, it will detect the backup user doesn't exist in the database. So it will recreate the database, recreate the user in your specific database. Yeah, so otherwise it's kind of flawless. If you would like to parameterize, then you have to make sure that the prerequisites are met. The prerequisites here is basically you need to supply a system key. By default, you don't need to supply because it goes through the system key. For example, if you do not have a system key and if you run the script, it will fail because it try to check that whether a system key is, a key named system is available or not. Let's say if you don't want to use the system, then you obviously need to supply the relevant parameter with the SK option. So SK and then your system key name. So if you provide that and that, here I have the user system. So system is kind of a power user. So you need to also have some user who has more access to the kind of database admin so that it can create another user, the backup user. Or in case you would like to supply the backup user as well, then you put the backup key name. So this is the way it will work. Yeah, otherwise you run it in default, provide the system key, it all works. Even though the user got deleted, you just need to rerun it.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. Yes.
Good. And here I see the backup is complete. So if you go to the resource and the last item of this is you see the backup items. So if you click on the backup items and then in the SAP HANA in Azure VM category, you can see the protected items. Obviously, I haven't taken any backup, so there is a warning that you need to take the initial backup. So how to take the backup is just to click on the backup now. And here you have to also give that how long the backup data would be retained. The least one you can provide is basically 1.5 months. So you cannot delete the backup data in 7 days just for your protection purpose. And then you click OK. So the backup job would be triggered. And immediately, if you go to the backup center now and you see the backup jobs, let's refresh a little bit. So you would be able to see the backup jobs over here. We can also drill down a little bit. So let's say I'm running in Contoso management. Then, of course, the allocation is West Europe. So let's not, let's not choose everything. So it's West Europe and data source. So here you have to choose SAP HANA in Azure VM. And then the time, yeah, let's see, 24 hours. Status is all selected. Operation, you can see that there are many different varieties of backup operation. So everything is selected. Vault, you can also specify the vault. You can see the vault is selected now. And now if you refresh, will take a couple of seconds, but then you will see the backup jobs over here. And if there is any issue with the backup job, you can also troubleshoot. You can get the backup logs through here as well to understand that what has been gone wrong or how to actually fix that error. So that's how the backup for the SAP HANA or SQL Server works. And you can easily integrate with your other um, uh, other solution that you have in your ecosystem. So this can be one of the appointed technology as your backup for your backup solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's really great. And I think with that, just a summary of what we've seen so far, right? We've seen an overview of Azure Backup in general, what it can do. We've talked a little bit about around security, and we've seen this really, really cool demo from Prasanjit around Azure Backups and how you actually configure the backups, how you install the agent, before you configure the backup, and how you able to enable the backup and view this in Backup Center that you can control. Just some additional things from what Prasanjit was just saying. We also have a lot of customers that are using third-party backup software. We do support the integration of that as well into Azure. For example, Veeam Backup is quite common, and even Veritas Net Backup. So if you are still, you're still invested in using these backup software, you can still do that. What a lot of customers are looking at is using that third-party software to orchestrate the backups, but at the same time, maybe looking at moving the backup data into a storage account, like in Azure, for example, like what you've seen already in the demo. So there's still investment by using your current licenses with your current third-party backup software and still integrating into Azure to use the additional capabilities. And on top of those storage accounts, you'll see the security enabled. There's a further enablement in terms of monitoring and a whole lot of other Azure native services that you can leverage. So with that, we have come to an end of episode 9 of SAP on Azure, focusing around Azure backups. Thank you for your interest in the session, and we really wish you a good day moving forward. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.